Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Azure Monitor again, but more specifically we're going to be talking about some of the service limits that exist within the service. So a lot of time when people talk about clouds, they'll be like, oh, we have unlimited resources, we can run everything that we want and do all these things. And that's actually true, but within some services there are specific limits and things that you need to be aware of. So specifically, and when you take a look at Azure Monitor, for example, as we're looking here, we're here on the Microsoft Docs website, and under here there is the Azure Monitor section, and there under References you have your service limits. So this is a pretty good article to go through and take a look at the various different limits that exist on the various services and capabilities of Azure Monitor itself. So for example, here we're looking at alerts. Under the alerts, we can see that hey, for the metric alerts, or at least for classic metric alerts, we have a hard default limit of 100 active alerts rules per subscription. So when you're creating your alerts, you have to keep that in mind. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to create a single alert for every single server that I have. So if I have 1,000 servers, you're going to quickly hit that 100 active alert rule metrics. So you have to think about those things a little bit different as you're going through that. Same thing for the more current standard metric alerts. You're limited to 1,000 active alert rules per subscription. So you have to work within that limit. For some of these, you can get extensions and you can call into support. So you can see here, there's not a defined maximum limit, but you can call into support and have them up that limit for you based on your particular needs. And they may have a conversation with you to say, hey, you probably should do these things different better because maybe these 100 alert rules you created, maybe they can be represented in like maybe 10 alerts rules or 10 metric alerts if you kind of rethink how you're going to do your alerting. The same thing for activity log alerts, 100 active alert rules per subscription, log alerts 512 per subscription. You have 2,000 action groups per subscription, and auto scale settings you have 100 per region per subscription. So just keep those things in mind as you're going through and creating your alerts, your alert strategy within Azure Monitor. So I'm going to just go scroll down here a little bit more. So if we get down to our action groups, so if you're going to be having action groups of like sending out an email when a particular alert happens, you got to keep in mind there are limits there as well. So 1,000 email actions per action group, and no more than 100 emails an hour. So getting flooded with hundreds or thousands of emails per hour, in a lot of cases, those things are probably not going to be actionable by your support team or your engineering team or whoever is going to be handling those alerts. So you have to keep that in mind when you're structuring these to, one, the system itself has these hard limits where they'll start throttling you back if you start exceeding those. Or you may have to call support if you have a unique use case where you need more than the default limits. And then moving on to ITSM integrations. So that would be if you want to have your actions or have your alerts tied to something like ServiceNow or something like that, a third-party system, or even a first-party if it's like Microsoft. I think Microsoft Service Manager may be supported. And then you have ServiceNow and maybe a few other offerings there that are native to the platform. You only have 10 of those per action group. And then if you're doing something like a run book or sending out SMS messages, you can see there's no more than one SMS message every 5 minutes. So you have a need to, if you have some particular alert that's firing every single minute, you're going to be throttled on that, where it may limit you to only fire those out every 5 minutes instead. So you may want to either change your alert logic so it's not as aggressive, or so you're not getting sent as much information as frequently. And the same applies for voice phone calls as well, where you're limited to one voice call every 5 minutes within those action groups. And then there's also limits on web calls and things like that. So you see here, maximum web calls is 1,500 per minute per subscription. So again, if you're integrating with something like Slack, if you're posting your alerts to like a Slack stream or to Teams, Microsoft Teams stream, using webhooks, you're going to be limited to 1,500 per minute across your subscription. So keep those limits and terms in mind if you start seeing you have some problems there. So Moving on, as we go down the list here, you can see there's some limits as far as the Log Analytics workspace. So as you may know, the Log Analytics workspace is kind of what's backing a lot of the capabilities of Azure Monitor, of Azure Security Center, of Azure Sentinel. It's really become kind of the store of a wide variety of platforms that are being lit up in Azure. It's kind of the storage repository and analytics and query backend for all of these services. So as you're looking here, you can see if you're on the current per gigabyte pricing tier model, limit per day. So there's no limit per day on the amount of data that can be ingested, but there are limits on the amount of data that can be retained. So it has a hard 730-day retention period. Is the max setting that's currently allowed. So if you have a need to store data for 10 years, you may have to come up with a different strategy for that, since that data won't be retained within the Log Analytics workspace. You can maybe archive some of that data off to a storage account or some other methodology to keep that data somewhere else. And then the same for if you're on the legacy free tier, you're limited to 500 megabyte per day and only a 7-day of data retention. So if you upload more than 500 megabyte in a day, that workspace will stop collecting data until the next day, and then that 500 megabyte limit will reset. So those are just some of the limits here. You can kind of read through those. This is a very, very good site to reference to get an idea of what those limits is, how much data you can return, how much data you can upload, how big your queries can be, how many records per query you can return. So often, like if you make a particularly long query across your entire environment, you may get, it may be millions of possible records that can be returned. However, the portal will limit that to only returning 10,000 results. To want to keep it performant. And then also, a lot of cases, I would say in most cases, it's probably not that useful to try to look or consume like millions of records at the same time as far as visually. You can parse through it and then pull out a subset of those records, but if the system is going to limit you to 10,000 of those records at a time as far as what it will actually display back to you. But it can parse across millions and millions and millions of records, but it'll only return up to 10,000 based on whatever your query results are. All right, so won't go through all of this, but just kind of one other thing that I'll mention here. So if you're leveraging the Application Insights, so again, Application Insight is a subset of Azure Monitor, and under here we have total data per day, default limit of 100 gigabyte, throttling, so you can do about 32,000 bits per second. So you kind of keep all these different metrics and limits and feeds in mind as you're scaling and using your Azure Monitor resources. So I hope this has been useful, and definitely might want to take a bookmark of this link and kind of reference as these limits and fees changes over time. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.